Remember that sound? That iconic sound of the Commodore Amiga booting up. You know, the whirring of the floppy drive, the colorful workbench. Ah, it takes you back, doesn't it?
Mm.
Well, someone just brought that classic computer crashing into the AI age by hooking it up to ChatGPT.
Yeah, talk about a blast from the past, right? I mean, it really is quite the juxtaposition. You have an emblem of 80s tech suddenly tapping into one of today's most advanced technologies.
You're ready for a deep dive into all things Amiga GPT. And you've sent us a treasure trove of articles, forum discussions, even some videos to help us on this journey.
Oh yeah, there's certainly been a buzz around this project. It seems like a lot of folks are eager to see their Amigas doing things that, well, no one really thought possible just a few years ago.
So let's start with the basics, shall we? What exactly is Amiga GPT?
At its core, it's a ChatGPT client. It's been tailored specifically for AmigaOS. You know what this means, right?
Mhm.
It allows these vintage machines to harness OpenAI's powerful language model.
Yeah.
But it's not just about generating text. Oh, no, no, no. AmigaGPT can answer your questions, compose creative content, and even create images using DALL-E.
Wait, hold on. It can create images on an Amiga. That seems almost unbelievable.
It's true, and that's just one of the ways that AmigaGPT blends the nostalgic charm of classic hardware with the cutting-edge capabilities of AI. It's like opening a time capsule and finding a message from the future.
We came across some videos online, and yeah, the image generation feature is pretty mind-blowing. But who's the mastermind behind this project?
Well, AmigaGPT is the brainchild of Cameron Armstrong. He's a developer who seems to have a real knack for bridging the gap, between vintage tech and modern software. He said in interviews that he loves bringing new capabilities to these classic machines, breathing new life into them.
And based on the buzz we've seen on forums, like the English Amiga board, it seems like the Amiga community is pretty thrilled about it. There's definitely a sense of pride, like a look what our Amigas can do kind of energy.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how AmigaGPT is tapping into that nostalgia while pushing the boundaries of what we thought these machines were capable of. But this also brings up some interesting questions about compatibility. We know not all Amigas were created equal.
Right, right. Initially, Amiga GPT only worked on systems running AmigaOS 3.2 or 3.9. And understandably, this left some users with older models feeling a bit left out.
Yeah, and those concerns were voiced pretty loudly in the forums. But fortunately, Cameron seemed to take that feedback to heart because he released a new version.
Mm.
In late 2024, Amiga GPT-2.
That's the one that works with AmigaOS 3.1, right?
Precisely. By switching to MUI instead of Reaction, he managed to extend the compatibility quite a bit.
Makes sense.
And it doesn't stop there. Amiga GPT is also compatible with AmigaOS 4.1 and even MorphOS. So it seems like Cameron really went the extra mile to make this project accessible to as many Amiga users as possible.
It's great to see a developer who's so in tune with the community. But let's get into the nitty-gritty. How does Amiga GPT actually work? I mean, connecting an Amiga to OpenAI servers, that can't be simple.
It's actually a pretty ingenious feat of engineering. Amiga GPT relies on Amiga Gesell to establish a secure connection with OpenAI's servers. But there's a catch. Users need an active OpenAI API key, which means a paid OpenAI account is required to use the program.
So there's a recurring cost involved.
That's right. Makes sense considering how OpenAI structures their pricing.
Yeah, for sure. But from what we've gathered online, the actual usage cost seems pretty minimal. We saw a post from someone who had been using it for like a year, and their total bill was only a few dollars.
Yeah, that's right. If you're already using ChatGPT regularly, the added cost of running it on your Amiga is probably negligible.
Okay, so now for the fun part. What can you actually do with Amiga GPT? I mean, we've already touched on text and image generation, but what are some of the standout features?
Well, one thing that really struck me is the customizable UI. It's always a nice touch to be able to personalize your workspace.
Hmm.
You can even tweak the look and feel to match your Amiga setup.
That's definitely something that Amiga users have always loved, tinkering with the UI. And speaking of classic Amiga features, let's not forget about the text-to-speech capabilities.
Ah, yes. Using the Amiga's iconic speech synthesis to actually hear the output from ChatGPT, it adds this wonderful layer of retro charm, doesn't it?
It's pure Amiga magic. We watched a French YouTuber, Ledoc, demonstrate the synthesis, and it was like taking a step back in time.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a reminder of how Amiga GPT seamlessly blends the old with the new. Of course, setting up the speech synthesis on Amiga OS 3.x does require a bit of effort. You'll need the narrator.device file, usually from your original Workbench disks, along with the translator.library. Amiga OS 4 users have it easier, though, with the flight device.
Right, right. And speaking of making things easier, Amiga GPT is available on Eminet, which is, a go-to resource for Amiga software. It's also bundled with some Amiga distributions like AmiKit and Cocken OS. So even if you're brand new to the Amiga world, getting started with Amiga GPT is pretty straightforward.
I think that speaks volumes about its growing popularity. Clearly, the Amiga community has embraced this unique marriage of vintage hardware and modern AI. But let's move beyond the technical aspects for a second. What are people actually doing with Amiga GPT in the real world? What are some of the use cases?
Exactly. Are we just talking about a cool novelty, or is there some real utility here?
Well, we stumbled upon a fascinating video from Listox, the same YouTuber who showcased the speech synthesis, and they were using Amiga GPT to help them write code, believe it or not, in GFA Basic and C. Those are languages commonly used for Amiga development, back in the day.
So it's not just a toy. It can actually be a practical tool for Amiga programmers, even today. That's pretty impressive.
It is.
And, it makes you wonder, what other creative applications are out there?
I think we're only scratching the surface. Connecting a system like the Amiga to a language model as powerful as ChatGPT opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. But before we get too carried away with the potential, let's address the elephant in the room. What's been the overall reaction to Amiga GPT? Because as with any new technology, there are bound to be different perspectives, maybe even some concerns.
You're absolutely right. We can't ignore the public discourse surrounding this project. And based on the forum discussions, the comments we've seen on Reddit, the response has been overwhelmingly positive.
People are genuinely excited to see their beloved Amigas stepping into the world of AI. It challenges the perception that these machines are just relics of the past. But as you mentioned, there have been some concerns raised, primarily about the need for a paid OpenAI API key.
Right, that's understandable. For some, it might feel like a barrier to entry, especially if they're not already using OpenAI services. But others argue that it's a small price to pay for access to such a powerful tool. After all, OpenAI needs to keep the lights on somehow.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Ultimately, each user has to weigh the costs and benefits and decide if Amiga GPT is the right fit for them.
Exactly. And let's not forget that this is still a relatively new project. There's always room for improvement and refinement. What's important is that the conversation is happening, that people are sharing their thoughts and experiences.
Absolutely. Open dialogue and diverse perspectives are crucial, especially when we're talking about technology that pushes boundaries and challenges our assumptions.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored what Amiga GPT is, how it works, and even touched on some of the public reactions. But this is just the beginning. There's so much more to uncover.
Indeed. We've only scratched the surface of this fascinating project. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve even deeper into the world of Amiga GPT, exploring its potential, its limitations, and its impact on the retro computing landscape.
Welcome back to our Amiga GPT deep dive. We've just scratched the surface of this fascinating project, and there's so much more to explore.
Indeed. We've talked about, the technical marvels and the initial buzz, but now I'm kind of curious to delve into some of the finer details. For instance, we've seen discussions online about those early compatibility limitations. Remember how the first version of Amiga GPT only worked with specific Amiga OS versions?
Oh, absolutely. The forums were like buzzing with opinions about that. But it seems like Cameron, the developer, really took that feedback to heart because the later releases broadened the compatibility significantly.
Yeah, it's a great example of a developer who's actively listening to the community, and responding to their needs. That kind of engagement is crucial, especially for a project that's pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible with vintage hardware.
Right. And speaking of pushing boundaries, we came across an intriguing thread online where people were discussing the potential for Amiga GPT to actually help preserve vintage software.
That's a fascinating concept. Could AI be the key to keeping these classic programs alive and relevant in the modern age?
It's a thought-provoking idea. I mean, imagine using AI to like update classic Amiga applications, maybe even translate them into modern programming languages.
Yeah, or think about the possibilities for game development. Could we see AI-assisted tools that make it easier to create new games for the Amiga? Perhaps even blending classic gameplay with modern AI elements.
No, that's a game I'd love to play. Just imagine a point-and-click adventure game where the world, reacts dynamically to your choices, powered by ChatGPT, running on an Amiga.
Sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But as exciting as these possibilities are, I think we need to temper our enthusiasm with a dose of realism.
Yeah, you're right. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I mean, AI is still a rapidly evolving field, and there are plenty of challenges to overcome.
Exactly. But that's part of what makes this so exciting. We're venturing into uncharted territory. Witnessing the convergence of two seemingly disparate worlds, classic hardware and cutting-edge AI. It's impossible to predict where it might lead.
It's like opening a treasure chest filled with both familiar artifacts and futuristic gadgets. Speaking of venturing into the past, we found another intriguing video that I think you'll find fascinating. It features a YouTuber named Dan Wood, and he's exploring whether the Commodore 64, an even older computer than the Amiga, can access ChatGPT.
Now that's a real blast from the past. The C64 holds a special place in many people's hearts, but it's even more limited than the Amiga in terms of processing power and memory.
You'd think it would be impossible to get something as complex as ChatGPT running on a C64.
Yeah, it would certainly be a challenge to say the least. So, how did this YouTuber manage to pull it off?
Well, instead of trying to run ChatGPT directly on the C64, which, would likely be impossible, he used a clever workaround. He leveraged a BBS client. Remember those?
BBSs. A true relic of the early online world. For those who might not be familiar, a BBS, or bulletin board system, was essentially an early form of online community, accessed through dial-up modems. They were all the rage before the internet as we know it took off.
Exactly. And this retro campus BBS acts as a gateway to ChatGPT. Dan demonstrates how to connect to it using a 64 NIC plus A, which is a network interface card for the C64.
So instead of running ChatGPT locally, the C64 is essentially accessing it remotely through the
That's the
BBS.
gist of it. Yeah, it's a testament to the ingenuity of the retro computing community. They're always finding these creative ways to overcome technical limitations.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the enduring appeal of these vintage machines. Even in the age of, smartphones and supercomputers, there's something captivating about pushing the limits of what these old timers can do.
Absolutely. It's like these machines have a story to tell, or a legacy that extends beyond their original purpose.
It makes you wonder what other classic tech could benefit from an AI boost. Imagine like an Atari 2600 with AI-powered graphics, or a ColecoVision that can play modern games.
Oh, the possibilities are endless. It's like giving these vintage machines a second chance to shine, to participate in the technological advancements of today.
Precisely, it's not just about nostalgia. It's about exploring the potential that lies dormant within these classic systems.
And that brings us back to Amiga GPT. This project has ignited a spark, not just in the Amiga community, but in the wider world of retro computing. It's a reminder that innovation can come from unexpected places, even from machines we might have dismissed as relics of the past.
Yeah, it's a powerful message about the enduring spirit of creativity and the boundless possibilities that emerge when we blend the old with the new.
We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. We've explored the broader implications of Amiga GPT, the potential for AI to revitalize vintage software, and even taken a detour into the world of C64s and BBSs.
But our journey isn't over yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the technical hurdles that Cameron Armstrong had to overcome to bring ChatGPT to the Amiga. It's a story of ingenuity, perseverance, and a deep passion for these classic machines.
Welcome back to our final installment on Amiga GPT. So far, we've talked about what it is, how it works, and some of the bigger picture implications. Now, I'm kind of curious, what were some of the technical challenges involved in bringing ChatGPT to the Amiga?
Well, it's one thing to imagine this kind of project, but it's another thing entirely to actually, pull it off. Remember, the Amiga was designed decades before the concept of AI even existed.
Right, so there must have been some hurdles to overcome, to put it mildly.
Absolutely. We came across some interesting discussions on GitHub where, users were reporting various bugs and issues. For example, one user mentioned a system crash when switching to the image generation tab on Amiga OS 3.x, and it turned out to be a compatibility issue with older versions of the operating system.
Ah, the joys of working with vintage tech. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sometimes.
Precisely. But what's remarkable is that the developer was able to pinpoint the problem and provide a workaround. It shows a real commitment to making this project work, even with all the complexities of older hardware.
We saw another GitHub issue where someone was getting U-Force hits when using AmigaGPT on an A4000T, and they even mentioned that it caused the program to crash occasionally.
Ah, yes, force hits. Those are debugging messages. They indicate potential memory access violations. They could be quite common when you're pushing the Amiga's hardware to its limits.
And running something as resource-intensive as ChatGPT on an Amiga definitely qualifies as pushing the limits, wouldn't you say?
It's no walk in the park, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that the developer is actively addressing these issues and improving the stability of the program, it really speaks volumes about their dedication.
It also seems like performance optimization was a major focus during development. We saw discussions about techniques like using the Amiga DOS stack cookie.
Right. That's a rather technical detail, but it essentially allows programs to dynamically request more stack space if needed. Think of it like, giving Amiga GPT a bit more breathing room to work with.
Ah, so it's like making sure the program has enough fuel to complete its journey without sputtering out halfway there.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it highlights the kind of, ingenuity that was required to make this project a reality. They really had to think outside the box to overcome the limitations of the Amiga's hardware.
There was also a discussion about error handling. Apparently, some users were getting cryptic error messages that didn't provide much helpful information.
Yes, the dreaded cryptic error messages. It's
Mm.
a it's a common problem with older software. Thankfully, the developer recognized the need for clearer error reporting, and they implemented improvements in later versions of Amiga GPT.
That's a relief to hear. I can't imagine, trying to troubleshoot a problem with just a bunch of technical jargon staring back at me.
Yeah, it's like trying to read a foreign language.
Yeah.
Not very helpful when you're trying to fix something. Clear error messages are crucial for making a program user friendly, especially for those who might not be tech wizards.
Right. Speaking of user friendliness, we came across an interesting request on GitHub. Someone asked the developer to consider changing the text encoding from UTF-8 to ISO 8859 for better French language support.
That's a great example of how even seemingly small details can have a significant impact on the user experience.
Mhm.
UTF-8 is it's a more modern coding scheme. It can represent a wider range of characters, but it's not always the best choice for older systems.
And the best part is the developer actually implemented this change in a subsequent release. It might seem like a minor tweak, but it shows that they're attentive to the needs of a diverse user base.
Yeah, it's a reminder that inclusivity is important, even in the niche world of retro computing. By accommodating different languages and character sets, Amiga GPT becomes accessible to a wider audience.
It's like breaking down language barriers and bringing people together through the shared love of vintage tech.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this whole deep dive has left me with a sense of awe at the ingenuity and dedication of the Amiga community.
I couldn't agree more. To see people finding ways to keep these classic machines relevant and pushing the boundaries of what they can do, it's truly inspiring.
Yeah, it's like a love letter to vintage technology written in the language of modern AI.
It makes you wonder what the future holds for Amiga GPT and projects like it. Will we see even more innovative applications that blend the past with the present?
Only time will tell, but one thing's for certain. The Amiga, even after all these years, still has the power to surprise us.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of Amiga GPT. We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical marvels to the philosophical implications.
We've learned about the challenges, the triumphs, and the sheer creativity that drives this community.
And hopefully you, our listener, have come away with a renewed appreciation for the enduring magic of vintage technology.
Perhaps you'll even be inspired to, dust off an old Amiga and see what wonders await.
And with that, we conclude our deep dive into Amiga GPT. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration.